Welcome today. I want to welcome you to our webinar. We're going to be talking about stopping the lead leak, why more leads aren't fixing your agency growth problem. And if you've not joined us before, my name is Carl Willis. I am the CEO at Agent Branding and Marketing and want to welcome you today. Thank you for taking some time out with us. And we're going to dive right in. So, insurance agents are under pressure to generate more activity, but activity without a conversion system is going to create waste. And so today we're going to look at what happens after visibility is created, how inquiries get captured, qualified, followed up on, handed off, tracked, and converted into revenue. And so, what we want to just set the table with is we're not here to talk about disconnected marketing services. At ABM, we are a strategy first, AI centric growth partner. And what we do is help agencies build an ecosystem that can support market dominance no matter what market you are operating in. And so, with that, let's jump right in. More leads are not always the answer, and that is a fallacy that we often hear out in the field. Sometimes what leads actually do is they expose a broken system faster. And what happens oftentimes is when production slows down, the first instinct is to buy more leads or increase ad spend, but more lead volume does not automatically fix your agency. If the response process or the intake standards or your follow up discipline or revenue tracking are weak, additional lead flow is simply going to expose those weaknesses faster. And so, our goal today is to help agents think upstream and downstream at the same time because visibility matters, but the system that receives that visibility is equally as important. And so most agencies are asking the question, how do we get more leads? Because lead volume feels like the obvious problem. But before increasing spend, an owner has to ask what is happening to the opportunities that are already being created. And so we need to understand that every inquiry has a cost attached to it. So if the agency paid to create attention, then the agency needs a disciplined process to protect that opportunity once that opportunity arrives. So it's very important that we be thinking both upstream and downstream. So most insurance agents don't actually have a pure lead problem. They actually have a leakage problem somewhere between that first contact and written business. And this is where your strategy matters. Lead generation, website conversion, calls, CRM usage, producer behavior, follow up, and tracking are not separate issues. They're actually parts of one growth ecosystem. So when one part breaks, that whole system is going to underperform. And we're going to be tackling these separate pieces of breakdown, these breakage points here in a moment. So, when we talk about your marketing, we want to talk about the ecosystem as a whole because the ecosystem creates visibility and demand. And that is only the beginning, though. A prospect still has to trust the agency. They have to reach someone quickly. They have to experience a strong first conversation. They have to move through the sales process and they have to be tracked all the way to policy revenue. So I want you to use the leak list to look at where there might be some breakdowns because lost revenue is really not dramatic. It's a series of small breakdowns. It can be a missed call. It can be a weak intake. It can be a delayed response. It can be a lead that never gets assigned or a policy that never gets connected back to the source that produced it. It can be poor qualification or a poor handoff. It can be poor tracking. So it can be a number of little things that lead to that leakage throughout the system. And you need to remember that every leaked lead costs you more than just a single opportunity. A leaked lead is going to cost time, it's going to cost ad spend, it's going to cost producer capacity, team confidence, and revenue predictability. But it's also creating confusion because owners start questioning the marketing quality when the real issue may not be the marketing quality, it may actually be the operational follow through. And so that's why we always look at marketing as part of a connected growth system because the objective is not just producing leads. The objective is to help you, the agency owner, convert demand into profitable retained policy owners because we've got to look at the cost of every leaked lead costing you time, capacity, stability, ad spend, confidence, and that predictable revenue. So there's a lot of components to that. Now, we often hear if we had just more leads, everything would improve. Well, that sounds logical, but it can become expensive very quickly. If the agent is already leaking opportunities, then more volume is only going to increase waste, and that assumption gets expensive quick. So the responsible move here is not to stop marketing. The responsible move is to repair the system so the next dollar spent actually has a better chance of producing revenue. So we want to look at the infrastructure of the system. Remember, a lead is not the finish line. The real question is how many qualified opportunities became consultations, quotes, bound policies, and retained clients. So the question is not how many leads did we get, it's really how much business got produced from that lead flow. And this is where growth becomes measurable. Once the agency is tracking the full path, it can see where the problem is, whether it's traffic, whether it's lead quality, response speed, whether it's the sales process, whether it's quote conversion or retention. So we want to look at the totality of that process. So there are 7 lead leaks that we're going to look at today. And these are the 7 lead leaks that you as an insurance agent really have to fix in your process to get maximum effectiveness out of your process and get maximum revenue potential from your lead flow. And these aren't theoretical, these are common breaking points that we see when we analyze marketing activity and when we see that this marketing activity gets disconnected from the sales process and from tracking. So, the rest of what we're going to do today is diagnostic. It's going to be a chance for you to really look at your process. And as we walk through each leak, it will be a chance for you to take a mental score of your own process and identify those 1 or 2 areas that may need immediate attention in your process. So the first one, and this is probably the biggest one that we see most often, and that's just simply missed calls. A missed call is the most expensive lead because it represents a high intent consumer that never even entered the sales process. The agency may have done everything right to create demand, but the opportunity disappeared at the point of contact because it was never answered. So make the point that the person is reaching out to you, the most important point that gets addressed. Because this is not an administrative detail, it's a revenue protection standard. And in today's world, there really is no excuse for a missed call. There's just no reason that a prospect should ever go to a voicemail. There's just too many mechanisms that allow for that call to get answered. And so let's dive into this one a little further. When somebody calls an insurance agency, they are usually taking action in the moment. And they may be shopping for auto or comparing home coverage or trying to understand Medicare or responding to a life event. And if the agency, excuse me, doesn't answer, the prospect does not wait patiently. What they're going to do is they're going to keep searching, they're going to call another agent or submit a form to a competitor. And speed and availability become part of the trust equation. You have to remember when a prospect calls, they are not casually browsing, they're taking action. And if you do not answer, someone else is going to answer that call. So it really is a non negotiable. A missed call can cost a consultation, a coverage need, a future renewal, a referral, a quote, or a referral source. So it represents more than just a lost quoting opportunity. It can become an entire missed household account, a missed cross sell, a missed referral source, a missed renewal stream, and for an insurance agency, the lifetime value of that good client really matters. That means the cost of poor call coverage is much bigger than just that one conversation, and we really have to keep that in mind. It's not just that one missed opportunity, it is multiple opportunities that are being missed. And so, what we need to do here is we need to set a call and quote intake coverage standard. And a call coverage standard should be written, assigned, measured, and improved. It can't live as just a vague expectation that somebody is going to answer the phone. It's got to be assigned specifically. So you've got to review your missed calls daily. You need to define who actually returns and owns those calls, use overflow support when it's needed, and review call outcomes on a weekly basis because what gets measured gets managed. So answer those calls during business hours, track the missed calls on a daily basis, review the call outcomes, use that overflow support, and then return missed calls within minutes. And that's one I really want to emphasize. It used to be okay to say return those calls in 24 hours. That's not good enough anymore. It used to be good enough to say return those calls within 2 hours. That's not even good enough anymore. In today's world, speed is the big differentiator. You really want to be on top of those missed calls within minutes. 15 minutes is the standard. I say 5 minutes or less. And again, somebody needs to take ownership of that, and it needs to be clear who owns that process. The next leak point that we want to look at is along those same lines, and that's slow response, because the prospect is not going to wait on you. Now, slow response is different from missed calls, but it really creates the same result. The prospect is going to move on emotionally before the agency ever has a real chance to compete. Because today's prospect is not going to wait on your agency, they're trying to solve a problem. And the agency that responds quickly often earns the first meaningful conversation. Now, slow response tells the prospect a couple of things. Even if the delay is innocent, the prospect interprets this as a signal. They may assume that the agency is too busy, disorganized, or difficult to communicate with. And in insurance, you have to remember trust is built before the quote. And so if the first interaction feels slow or uncertain, the prospect may assume that the entire service experience is going to feel that way. And people make buying decisions based on emotion and then they support it with logic. And so if the feeling is not good on the front end, you're never going to get to the logical support. Remember this, fast response does not close the sale by itself, but slow response can lose it before it ever starts. The agency is still going to need experience, it's still going to need fit, pricing, and follow through, but slow response can eliminate the agency before the sales process ever has a chance to get started. And so this isn't about panic, but it is about removing avoidable friction and protecting those paid for opportunities. Remember, if you're going to spend the money on marketing, you want to at least get the opportunity to have that sales conversation. And then create response time rules for yourself. New form leads should receive a fast response. Missed calls should be returned quickly, and after hours leads should be addressed first thing the next business day. And then every lead should get logged and assigned. The important thing for you is ownership. Somebody has to be responsible for those leads. So a response time rule without assignment is just a preference. A written standard with accountability becomes an actual system. Now, our third leak that we want to look at is a weak conversation, that first conversation. Because the first call is not just intake, it is the first sales moment. And so on that first conversation, we're not just collecting data, it is the first piece of your sales process. It's the first trust moment, and it is the first chance to demonstrate that the agency is organized and that it is competent. And if there is a weak first conversation, we are often leaving a bad first impression and creating unclear value statements, unclear next steps, and we are also creating a fog about why the agency is different from every other option out there. And so we need to make sure that we are creating a clear and distinctive reason for that prospect to be doing business with us. So here's what creates most weak intake calls and what gets missed. Most agencies are gathering basic contact information and policy type, but what they don't uncover is motivation, urgency, concerns, timeline, premium sensitivity, or the desired outcome. And those are those emotional factors. Remember, people make decisions based first on emotion and then they support it with logic. So those questions matter because they help the agency understand the prospect's real decision-making criteria. And without that context, the quote process becomes transactional instead of consultative. And so what we start missing is we miss the why now, the result that they want, the timeline and why that matters, what step should happen next, what problem are they really trying to solve, that emotional motivation, the concerns they have, and their premium sensitivity. Is it realistic or not? So the first conversation should create confidence. That prospect should leave the conversation thinking, this agency is organized, they understand my need, they ask good questions, and I know what happens next. That confidence is going to reduce uncertainty, and it's also going to give the producer or account manager a stronger foundation for taking that next step. So, what you want to do is build a simple intake structure, a framework. And what that's going to do is create consistency without making the conversation robotic. So, policy line, location, motivation, timeline, premium sensitivity, decision makers, prior conversations, and next step should be captured clearly. So your goal here is not complexity. The goal is to make sure that every prospect gets a professional, complete, and repeatable first experience in that conversation. Now, the fourth leak that we often see is poor qualification because not every lead is a good opportunity, and that's okay. Qualification is not about being dismissive, it's about respecting the agency's capacity and routing people correctly. So, good qualification will protect your team. It's going to improve the prospect experience, and it's going to help the owner understand whether marketing is actually creating the right kinds of opportunities. So, poor qualification will create wasted consultations, producer team frustration, lower close rates, unrealistic quotes, bad fit quotes, and then owner confusion about whether the marketing is actually working. And so we want to get away from those types of things. When every inquiry is treated the same, high quality prospects actually may not be getting the right attention, and the team is busy chasing poor fit opportunities. So, good qualification is going to help reverse that. So, agencies really need to be qualifying for the licensed market, policy line, scope of coverage need, premium sensitivity, timeline, decision process, motivation, and overall fit. And the point here is not to interrogate the prospect. The point is to understand whether the agency can actually help, and then what path makes sense, and what level of urgency is appropriate. So the goal here is not to reject people, the goal is to route them appropriately. So a good fit prospect should move to a consultation or to a quote process. A future fit prospect should enter into a nurture process. A poor fit prospect can be directed to a helpful resource or a referral, and an unclear fit prospect may need a discovery call. And what this does is it protects the agency while still creating a professional experience for the consumer. And it's going to maximize the use of your time or your team's time and your resources as well. The fifth leak that we often see is no follow-up system. So you have to remember good prospects don't always book with you immediately. And that doesn't mean that they're bad leads. It means that they often need more confidence, more clarity, or just better timing. And without a good follow-up system, the agency loses prospects who were interested but not ready at the exact moment of first contact. And follow-up cannot be dependent upon memory, it can't be dependent upon mood, and it can't be dependent upon spare time. If it is, it's going to fail. And if it depends on you getting back around to it, it still is going to fail. So a serious growth system is going to use CRM tasks, templates, automation, and assigned ownership so that no qualified opportunity disappears because the team got too busy, too distracted, preoccupied with other projects. So remember this, good follow up is not nagging. It reinforces trust, it answers objections, it clarifies what the next steps are, it keeps the coverage need active and in front of the prospect. It prevents competitors from owning the conversation.
Yep,
And for
I
agents,
agree.
this is especially important because insurance decisions are generally going to be delayed by complexity, fear, comparison shopping, or just simply the timing of life. And so we want to make sure that we stay with that prospect through their entire decision making process, no matter what other things may be happening in their life. And then we also want to have a good follow up cadence. And remember, immediate response creates speed. So, day one, we want to add value. Then we want to point to the next step. Day three, we're going to check in. Day seven, we're going to provide some helpful planning content. Day 14, we've got a final soft follow up. And then from there, we go to monthly long term nurture to keep the agency visible for future timing. Now, you can adjust your exact cadence, but the principle stays the same. Follow up should always be intentional, it should be documented, it should be consistent. So we want to have an immediate response as soon as they make that initial contact. We want to add helpful resource plus next step on day one. Day three, we want to check back in. Day seven, we want to have coverage need planning content. Day 14 is that final follow up. And then we want to keep them in that nurture sequence until they either become our customer or they tell us to buzz off. And so we want to stick with that process and then just adapt it however you need to. Then we've got leak number 6, weak producer handoff. Marketing creates interest, but sales needs context. And what this really means is if we don't give our producer the right context, we really put them at a disadvantage because we need to help them convert that interest effectively. And so if our handoff is weak, the prospect is going to feel that disconnect. So in a strong ecosystem, the lead source, the message, the motivation, the prior engagement all need to travel with the prospect into the sales conversation. So a producer shouldn't have to start cold when the prospect has already engaged with the agency. So the context that should come along should be the source, the service requested, the motivation, the premium sensitivity, the timeline, the concerns, the pages viewed, the content that's been engaged with, and prior conversations. All of those things matter and they should come along on that journey. And what's going to happen is that context will help the producer personalize that conversation and also reduce friction as that sales process continues. When context gets lost, here's what happens. The prospect has to repeat themselves, which then causes trust to weaken because the sales rep sounds uninformed. And the next step then becomes unclear, which causes the opportunity to cool down. And this is why your CRM discipline is not just administrative, it's critical. It directly affects the conversation. It keeps the process moving along smoothly, and it makes your team look like they operate efficiently and effectively. Remember, every qualified lead should include contact information, coverage summary, source, pain points, premium sensitivity, timeline, fit notes, promise next steps, and the assigned owner. If that information is not captured, it's not visible, then the agency is forcing the sales team to recreate context instead of using it to advance the opportunity. You're putting your sales team at a disadvantage. And then finally, the seventh leak is no policy revenue tracking because lead volume is not the final metric. Revenue is. If an agency cannot connect leads to policies and revenue, it's unable to confidently know what is actually working. And this is where marketing becomes accountable. It's also where smarter decisions become possible. Most insurance agents track the number of leads, website traffic, form fills, cost per lead, ad spend, phone calls, and that's really not enough. They're useful indicators, but they're not enough. They tell you activity happened, but they don't tell you whether profitable business was actually created. So an agency can have a low cost per lead and still have a bad campaign if those leads do not become profitable policies. So the agency needs to measure the full path. And we need to be measuring from inquiry to qualified opportunity to consultation to quote to bound policy, all the way to revenue. That way, you can evaluate gross margin, close rate, and cost per bound policy. What this does is it changes the conversation to from are we getting leads to which sources create profitable clients. And that's the level of accountability required to create scalable growth. So, what you want to do is make this a monthly leadership discipline. Every month, review your lead sources, your consultation rates, your quote rates, your bound policies, your profitable policies, and the points where opportunities leaked. The goal here is not to blame, the goal is diagnosis. Once the biggest leak is identified, your agency can then focus improvement where it will create the greatest impact. And then you want to score each area on a scale of 1 to 5. A 1 means it's inconsistent or it's unmanaged, and a 5 means it's written, assigned, and measured and is actively being improved upon. So score your call coverage, your first conversation, your follow-up, your revenue tracking, your response time, your qualification, and your sales handoff. And then look at those and determine what needs the greatest attention and what needs the greatest attention first. It gives you a simple diagnostic. You don't need to fix everything at once. You just need to identify the weakest link that is costing you the most opportunity. Now, I want to give you a 30-day lead leak repair plan. So after diagnosing your leaks, the next question is where to start. And so this plan will break your work into 4 manageable weeks so that you can take the work, break it out, and really systemize your focus. So we'll look at your capture and response, your qualification and scripting, your follow-up and handoff, and then your tracking and review. So this isn't about adding complexity, it's about installing enough structure to stop obvious revenue loss. So let's look at each one of these individually. First one is your week one priorities, and that's capture and response. And in capture and response, we're going to make sure that every lead is captured and that it is responded to quickly. So we want to track every lead. We want to review missed calls. We want to set response standards, and we want to assign ownership, and then we want to confirm our after hours process. So in week one, we're going to establish visibility into your lead flow, because if the agency cannot see every opportunity, it cannot protect every opportunity. So again, we're going to track every lead. We're going to set response time standards. We're going to confirm our after hours process. We're going to review our missed calls, and we're going to assign lead ownership. So that's all we're going to do in that first week. In week two, we're going to focus on qualification and scripting. So our real priority here is quality and consistency in that first conversation. So we're going to create intake questions. We're going to define good fit criteria. We're going to create routing for poor fit leads. We're going to train our call handlers. We're going to clarify when a consultation should be set. And then we're going to look at our setting rules. And what this will do is this will improve the experience for both your prospect and also your team, because then everyone knows what information matters and what the next steps are and what the next step fits. In week number 3, our priorities are follow-up and handoff. And so we're going to build the follow-up and handoff structure. So we're going to create the follow-up cadence. We're going to create our email and text templates. We're going to define the producer handoff checklist. We'll assign the follow-up owner, and we'll track our next steps. And this is where many agencies gain back opportunities that were previously disappearing into silence. And then finally, in week 4, we're going to work on tracking and review. And this final week is going to focus on the review and accountability. So we'll look at our lead sources. We'll review consultation rates. We'll review our quote rates. We'll review bound policies. We'll identify the biggest leak, and we'll set next month's improvement priority. And so growth systems are not fixed all at once. They are continually improved. So this will be an ongoing process. So next month, you'll do the same thing. Week 1, you'll start over again. When week 2, week 3, week 4, and this will just be a continuing process with your system. Now, again, we want to move quickly but deliberately through the list, and we want to remind ourselves of what we're looking at. We want to look at missed calls, slow response, weak first conversations, poor qualification, no follow-up system, weak producer handoff, and no policy revenue tracking. You don't need more disconnected tactics. What you need is a connected ecosystem that protects opportunity from the first touch to retained revenue. Because what we want to do is we want to plug all of these leaks, and you're going to work on those one by one. You don't have to tackle them all at once, but one by one. Remember where we started. Stop asking, how do we get more leads? And start asking, where are we losing the opportunities that we already have? That's the strategic shift that you want to make. Once you see the full path, you can make better decisions about your marketing spend, your staffing, your automation, your follow-up, and your sales accountability. Remember, when you put more leads into a broken system, you create more waste, more frustration, more confusion, more pressure, more bad decisions. And the agency can blame the lead source, the team, or the market without actually seeing the process failure. But what we want to deal with is the process failure. And the responsible path is to fix the leaks first and then scale confidently. So when the leaks are fixed, more leads become more consultations become more quotes become more sold policies, your marketing becomes easier to measure, and that's the real promise. It's not just more activity, but more manageable growth. And a stronger system is going to give you better visibility, and it's going to give your team better execution. Now, if you need help looking through your ecosystem and looking at your process, feel free to schedule a revenue leak audit with us. We'd be happy to take a look at your process, your system, and look at where you may have some leakage. And you can do that at agentbrandingandmarketing.com/schedule, or you can call us at 888-572-8758. And what this is a strategic time to diagnose what's going on in your agency and to look at where you may be losing opportunities and where you may need to fix some things. And so we'd be happy to do that with you. After the audit, you're going to know where leads are leaking, what needs to be fixed first, what metrics you need to be measuring, and where your team needs to improve on process and how to improve conversion before you look at spending more on ads, leads, or other marketing tactics. What we want to encourage you to do is not spend more money filling a leaking bucket. We want to fix the leaks and strengthen the system so you can scale and scale well. That's always been our philosophy in action. Strategy before tactics, ecosystem before isolated channels, and market dominance is always the objective. That being said, I want to open the floor for any questions. If you've got any questions, feel free to throw those in the chat, and I'll be happy to tackle those for you. All right, I don't see any questions coming in, so we will wrap this up. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule. We will have another webinar same time next month. We'll put a topic out soon, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care.